Wolf, despite the global implications that would follow if North and South Korea went to full-on war, the truth is the Korean Peninsula would really bear the brunt of all of this, and that's where most of the fighting would take place. So we know that the DMZ between the South and the North is so heavily fortified that neither side can just charge in and go across that land to attack the other. So if the North wanted to step this up and make it happen, what do they do?
Tom, the very first thing we're going to see is large concentrations of artillery and missile fire from the north against targets in the south, for example, Seoul, which is just a little south of the DMZ. What's interesting is those firing positions are on the north slope of the mountains that define the DMZ. Very difficult for the coalition forces in the south to see those pieces before they're activated.
So while that firing is occurring from these mountains down here, what else is going on from the north?
The north is going to activate the insertion of special operations forces, both along the coasts.
Taking them in by ship or by submarine?
By submarines, most likely, as well as the activation of sleeper agents that have been in the South, in some cases as many as a couple of decades, identifying targets for these missiles and for these artillery pieces.
Okay, the U.S. and South Korea is not just going to sit there while all of this happens. So what is the immediate response if such an attack took place?
Number one is the U.S. Navy will increase its presence. For example,
more aircraft carriers,
more
destroyers, whatever
more
it takes.
aircraft is what we're looking for. So you have aircraft that's in Japan, you have aircraft that's in South Korea. You now have these aircraft to go against these firing positions that are targeting the South. It's called the counterfire fight. And once that's accomplished, they will then go after the command and control capabilities as well as the air defenses.
Communications, air defenses,
you
all
got
of that, so they can control the sky.
Completely own this airspace above North Korea.
And then what happens?
Then they're probably going to go after some very specific targets like bridging in the north to eliminate the freedom of movement so these North Korean forces cannot maneuver in their own country.
All right, so if all of that happens, obviously you have a shift in the battle. The North takes the initiative to start the attack, but then the South and the U.S. responds. How quickly does it turn so that the initiative is not in the hands of the North, but is in the hands of the U.S. and the coalition?
Tom, what's
forces?
important to realize is the coalition, U.S. and South Korean response will be instantaneously. However, the control of that will be over the course of probably 3 to 4 days, and the momentum will shift toward the coalition. And their objective is to maintain the armistice.
But you don't think this is going to happen? You think ultimately
No, I don't.
This is not what's going to happen?
Not at all. I think the
It's a
risks
worst-case scenario.
are way too high. The North understands that, and the United States and South Korea certainly understands that.
So what would we expect?
Mostly limited objective attacks. Not unlike what we saw before.
When they bombed those islands, when they attacked the boat off the coast, that sort of thing.
You've got it, where the North Koreans will go after South Korean specific targets, not targeting the United States, and try to keep it contained somewhat.
And yet send a very clear message that they have a strong new leader and a strong military, and that they still need to be respected.
The Unha-3 may represent the most advanced technology we've ever seen come out of North Korea. About 105 feet tall, weight 175,000 pounds at liftoff, and payload of 220 pounds. More importantly, when you look at this, you realize what they've done here. They've launched a 3-stage liquid fuel rocket all the way up and put a satellite into orbit, which even now is circling the Earth. They've been working 14 years toward this moment, and when you combine it with their nuclear weapons program, a lot of nations are getting worried. Let me bring in a map, and I'll show you why. Up until this point, when the North Koreans have talked about a ballistic missile, we've pretty much figured it's something they could fire here, and it would go about 4,000 miles, so the outermost ring here may be to the edge of Alaska on a good day, if everything went right for them. But now, with this one, we're talking about 6,000 miles. The ring goes out further, and now you're talking about maybe reaching Washington State, Oregon, California. I think a lot of things have to go right for that to happen, but nonetheless, it's no longer
If North Korea appears, South Korea here, the two capitals. Let's say that North Korea, in fact, did launch a missile, and it went out over the Pacific and over Japan. What happens?
Well, Tom, instantaneously what's going to occur is there will be a tracking. The telemetry of that missile will be tracked, which means we'll identify where the launch is, what the arc of the flight looks like, and what the intended target or impact
So we would know within a matter of
like.
seconds if it was headed for
Instantaneously,
Japan.
we would pick this up by sea, by ground, by air, and by space, this integrated target system. And the Japanese even have an Aegis cruiser, which is part of this integrated radar system.
So if it went out there and, in fact, it was not headed to any target we cared about, but went to the sea, as North Korea would say, a test of the missile, would there be any response?
There would be no kinetic response at all. We would not fire back. If we knew that it was going to land harmlessly, we would collect tremendous intelligence And then we would scramble ships to go find the debris so we can continue to collect some good intelligence.
All right, let's look at another scenario here, which is another possibility. Let's say that North Korea instead, with a missile or with perhaps artillery, started shelling some sort of target down here in South Korea, and specifically, let me say, a South Korean military target. No U.S. troops involved, not a civilian target. What happens then?
Well, very important to differentiate between striking a U.S. facility in South Korea or South Korean facility in South Korea. Very, very important. And to minimize civilian casualties. What I think would happen immediately is the response is, if North Korea fires, the United Nations Command, the Combined Forces Command of the United States and South Korea, would return very precise fire against that location of launch. Not to escalate, but to maintain the DMZ and the armistice. But if they fire, we would fire back.
Simple equation on that. And then let's look at the one scenario that possibly gets much more out of hand among things that seem like they might vaguely be possible. What if North Korea, in fact, did something like, remember when they shelled some islands over here, basically saying this is disputed territory in terms of who owns what? Let's say they attacked a facility like this in a strong way and tried to land there and essentially seize the property. What happens then?
Tom, not unlike what we just discussed, if the North Koreans were to target and then try to occupy, the United Nations Command, again, would go reclaim that. There would be a fight to get that island back if that was the case. I don't suspect that that would happen. We have seen this specifically before. What might occur, and we have to think about this, the 2018 Winter Olympics are in the town of Pyeongchang. That is tucked up in the northeast corner of South Korea.
You've been there.
I've been there, physically walked the terrain. It's absolutely beautiful. This is where the Winter Olympics are, and it's very close to North Korea. If North Korea was to take an aggressive action against Pyeongchang, that would cause an incredible international implications and a possibly reconsideration. Is this where the Winter Olympics are really going to be held 6 years from now, after the leadership here has had some additional time to try to weaponize their nuclear capabilities?
And again, any indication that even if they did this, that this would spark a larger war, or would it still try to be contained, limited?
Tom, the objective of the armistice and the ceasefire is to maintain the armistice. The presence in South Korea is not to expand and reclaim, reunify the peninsula. It is to hold what we want.